This afternoon we have Dr. Elena Craft with us from the Environmental Defense Fund in Austin, Texas. Dr. Craft, could you give us a couple comments about what you've heard from the public regarding hydraulic fracturing in the state?
So I think the public has a number of different concerns around hydraulic fracturing and potential health impacts. Water is an issue that everyone is very concerned about, especially in states where we have severe drought issues. Air quality is a consideration for many states. We know that there are some areas around the country where emissions from oil and gas drilling operations may be impacting whether the area meets federal health-based air quality standards. We have community health issues, things like emergency response availability and meeting the needs of the community with the additional influx of people that are coming to areas that are involved in, for areas where there is a lot of hydraulic fracturing going on. And then there's also, issues regarding things like noise, the number of truck trips that are made to build out a well, and obviously the proximity of those sites to neighborhoods, communities, schools.
What are some of the impacts that we have seen for some of these lower socioeconomic communities that have been faced with hydraulic fracturing?
So some communities that are already overburdened by any number of environmental issues are concerned about the impacts of hydraulic fracturing on their communities because, for instance, these communities may have a higher incidence of asthma. And so emissions coming from oil and gas operations could be exacerbating an existing problem. Also, vulnerable populations, the children, elderly, are at an increased risk for cardiorespiratory disease with poor air quality. Also, water issues are a major concern. There are very rural areas where they depend on wells for their drinking water, and contamination of water supplies has been a serious challenge in some places across the country.
Are there any communities or any states that have done particularly good policies to address this issue of the impact of fracking on lower economic communities?
So a number of states have put in place a lot of different types of regulation. There isn't one state that's doing everything right. What we have seen is that because the industry is so dynamic, there's a lot of development in terms of technology. There are differences in terms of geology of different areas, and so all of the rules that are in place across the country are very regional in scope in some cases. And so we have a challenge in terms of developing model policies because it's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all approach. In Colorado, there have been very strong controls that have been placed to limit methane from oil and gas operations, and that has been a terrific model for reducing the amount of climate pollution coming from this industry.
What are some of the most progressive things that you would recommend for a policymaker to do to alleviate some of the burdens that we're seeing from this industry?
I think that policymakers need to have the responsibility of talking with their constituents, especially in places where they may be considering or where fracking is already happening, to I think alleviate some of the concerns that those communities have. A lot of times the communities just want to know that the policymakers are aware of the issues and that they are doing things that can help address some of the problems that the community sees from having industry come to their particular community.
And as a scientific researcher, what are some of the answers you possibly can help give to policymakers regarding dealing with this issue of fracking in lower economic communities?
Well, we'd like to see our goal for policymakers is to create policies where there is continuous improvement seen in the policy. So, for instance, it's not just that you have one policy that you develop and then you don't go back and review that policy. It's that you set a policy in place that you continue to revise and update as you understand the risks from the industry, as you know more about the technologies, as you learn more about the geography and geology of the area. So there are a lot of things that policymakers can do in writing strong policy that will help the industry, I think, as a whole.
Well, thank you very much for speaking with us today, Dr. Craft. On behalf of the National Conference of State Legislatures, we want to say thank you.
Thank you so much.